Plastic septic tanks. I know. Not a super common thing that we're going to talk about because they don't really pop up that often, at least in Maryland. And today I'm stuck in pretty much standstill traffic, so we're going to have a conversation while we forge our way forward. What started this whole thought is I was working on a property that was only built a few years ago, and it has a plastic tank. The person who's purchasing this property was flummoxed by the fact that there was a plastic tank on their property. I had to explain, listen, plastic tanks they exist. They're not super common, but they usually exist. And I think this is going to be a fun conversation to have with those of you who are not in Maryland, because other states may use them more than us. Typically, in our state, we use what's referred to as concrete. Now, I know, wild, tried and true, simple, basic concrete. Those tanks are great. They're made to last. Typically, we're going to see them last about 60 to 80 years. The reason why I keep using the term typically is because everything's a little bit different. Some systems will last a lot longer than other systems, just like some cars last longer than other cars. So we're going to work more with averages today when we have this conversation. This house was built a few years ago, like I just said. System was installed with a plastic tank and 2 drain fields. Very common setup. Most of our houses are going to be a concrete tank with 2 drain fields, sometimes 3 or 4 if it's a large home or bad soil. What is the difference between a concrete tank and a plastic tank is something you might be wondering. And the simple answer is there's not really that much of a difference to them. They have roughly the same capacity. They're both 1,500 gallons equivalent. They're roughly the same shape. Usually they're 10 foot by 5 foot and usually 6 feet of total depth between the top of the tank and the bottom of the tank. The main difference that comes from them is the longevity, the design, and the color. So when we look at a concrete tank, we usually expect a 60 to 80 year shelf life. A plastic tank, they'll argue, like the manufacturers and other people who put them in are probably going to argue that they last a lot longer. If you're an installer, leave a comment below. How long do your plastic tanks typically last? In our area, I usually see plastic tanks are only going to last about 20 years before we start running into a relatively large problem. And that relatively large problem is collapse. The tank itself, as you put dirt on top of it, not only does the tank have to survive the weight of the water, so going out, but it also has to survive the crushing depth of dirt. Dirt is heavy. Most of the manufacturers that I'm aware of don't want any more than 3 foot of cover on top of their plastic tanks. The same should go for a concrete tank, but concrete's way more resilient, so usually you can get away with getting a little bit more dirt on there. Most of our systems nowadays are only permitted for between 18 and 36 inches of cover to be on top of your tank. So 3 foot. Plastic tanks are most commonly crushed by people not paying attention to them with cars. So for example, if you drive a pickup truck, like an F-150, over top of your tank, going to the back door to maybe move a treadmill or something like that, what'll happen is the weight of that pickup truck will crush the top of the tank or concave it a little bit, or maybe even crack the plastic. When you look at the size difference between the two, most of the time when you have a concrete tank, it's going to be rectangular. It's going to be smooth walled, and most of the time it'll be like 90 to 95% of the tank is one piece, and then they'll have a lid that goes on top. A plastic tank is going to be more pill-shaped, and it's designed in form, so it's basically going to be one piece. Plastic tanks, as the pill shape, they're also going to have ribs on the walls, and so that gives a little bit more structural integrity compared to a rectangle. Concrete tanks can sometimes be circular, but I don't really see that in Maryland. It's usually like Pennsylvania or like the north portion of Maryland is where you might see a circular tank. They're really weird to work on. I'm not a big fan of them. It's a pain in the butt, but you know, they exist. They're out there. Most commonly what we use though is going to be square or rectangular. The color of these systems, typically concrete, you know, gray, nothing special about it. Plastic tanks will usually be green, sometimes they'll be black. Like the inside will be like a milky grayish white color, and they're gonna have support structures in the tank. So most concrete tanks, you don't really need extra reinforcement to prevent the lid from collapsing on itself, but plastic tanks you do. If you pump out a plastic tank and the water's not there to help kind of push out the dirt, the dirt's gonna want to fill that void, which usually indicates that that tank is going to get crushed, which kind of sucks. The cost difference between a concrete tank and a plastic tank is pretty significant. It's almost 2 to 3 times cheaper to get a plastic tank compared to a concrete tank. But with that cost difference, you also get a longevity difference. So remember, concrete, we should expect it to go about 60 to 80 years, and plastic, I usually see them last about 20 to 30. Plastic tanks are also usually going to have a different looking riser attached to them. So most standard concrete tanks will have a concrete riser, a black plastic riser, a green plastic riser, and they're going to interlock with one another. A plastic tank is going to have a black riser that'll have like almost looks like a castle type rim to it, where it's up, down, peaks and valleys, and they interlock with one another. So it's a little bit different. So if you ever see a lid that has that castle looking shape to it, that tank probably is plastic. So if you're buying a house, selling a house, building a house, and you see that, that probably means you got a plastic tank. When you're designing a system for a house, the county is going to get involved, or at least in our state, the county will get involved. And the county is going to kind of help dictate, what are you allowed to install? What are you going to install? And did they install it correctly? Which is good for you as a consumer. As a consumer, it's important to have oversight, and the county will make sure that the installer does it correctly. That's not to say, though, that we are not going to have some problems with settling. So this property we're looking at, again, a couple years old. It's now had time for all of the pipes in the tank itself to settle. And that's where we got into our problem. The tank looks fine, but the problem we're running into is going to be the pipe leaving the tank. The pipe is settled in a way to where the pipe itself, as it sits, is going to have water sitting in the pipe, almost submerging the entirety of the pipe, which is a problem. This is going to cause ventilation issues. This is going to also cause potential clogging issues. The main issue you could really kind of run into is the drainage. What do I mean by drainage? If you think about a 2-liter soda bottle, if you turn that bottle upside down, the problem you're going to have is the glug, glug, glug as the air tries to replace the water that's coming out of the 2-liter bottle. The way that you fix that is you put a hole at the top of the bottle, which allows air to come into the bottle so that we can get a smooth flow of water out of the bottle. Same principle applies for a septic system. So if you have the pipe full of water and then you add more water to it, the water will get out, but it will not drain as quickly and efficiently because you're not able to exchange the air from one side to the other. So it creates a glugging sound or some kind of weird drain situation. How do you fix that? With the concrete tank, usually it's just relay the pipe, call it a day. With the plastic tank, it could be the tank itself has been crushed or starting to crush. So the main thing is you have to dig up the outside of the tank and the back line, which is the outlet side, to see what is going on with this system. You want to see where's the pipe, how's it look, what's going on with it, and then you can replace it as necessary. Most commonly, it's just relaying the pipe, putting some stone underneath it, getting it to have the correct pitch, and then you should be back in business, no problem. Now you may be wondering, why would anybody install a plastic tank if they don't last as long, if they usually have more issues with settling? And that would be a great question. And typically in our area, why we see a plastic tank versus a concrete tank is site conditions. Let's say you have an incredibly aggressive slope on your property. You might not be able to get a tank setter to back up to it and drop the concrete tank, into the hole. You might have to get a plastic tank because that can be manhandled a little bit more, or that can also be dragged by the machine and set in a little bit easier position. Same thing goes if you have to crane the tank over a house. Most of the guys I know, rather than craning a concrete tank over a home, they'd rather crane a plastic tank over a home. And then finally, it comes down to price. Most of the time, whenever I see a plastic tank installed, it almost always is price related, and it almost always is done by the homeowner, because a homeowner is going to have a lot harder time getting their hands on a concrete tank than they would getting their hands on a plastic tank. Even Home Depot sells plastic septic tanks, so you can buy them from the big box stores. Typically, when I see a plastic tank on a property, my first thought is, homeowner must not have pulled permits and then gone ahead and installed this on their own to avoid any of the costs. Now, they may have pulled permits, but usually they don't. My absolute favorite is when you see a plastic tank underneath of a driveway. That's a big no-no. Not allowed to do that. Again, remember, 3 foot of dirt is the max amount of weight that you want to have on a plastic tank. So if you put a driveway over top of it and then you put a car over top of it, you're just asking for trouble. And they usually are always broken and cracked. So you end up having to replace the tank again anyway. Those are just the fun things of working in this world of well and septic. Now, should you buy a plastic tank? My opinion's no. I would argue that you want to get a concrete tank all the time. And again, for me, it's the longevity. It's going to last so much longer than the plastic tank. If you're in a pinch, a plastic tank will do, and plastic tanks are fine. Like, it's not illegal to have a plastic tank. People do them, but they've installed them all the time. They're just not super common in our area, and they're also not going to last as long. So if you're saving a third of the price, well, okay, well, you just have to replace it more frequently. And maybe in 20 years, the technology gets better. Maybe somebody designs a better plastic tank, and the next one maybe lasts 30 years. The technology is always changing, right? The earliest plastic tank I've ever seen was from the 90s. I don't know if they were doing that in the 70s or 80s, but as far as I'm able to see, it's mid-90s is the earliest I've ever seen plastic systems. What that means is, though, the plastic systems have only been around for 30 years, so they really haven't been innovative enough to really be for sure that this thing's going to last 80 years like a septic tank that's made of concrete would last. Concrete tanks have been made since the 50s, and the only real difference in the way that they make them nowadays is older tanks had a mid-seam. Modern tanks have a top seam. The concrete usually looks fine. It's almost always the seal in the middle that caused the older tanks to have to get fixed up or replaced. Modern septic systems with the top seam tanks, you don't have to worry about that. If the seal goes bad, whatever. It's not leaking water. You don't have roots as long as you don't put a tree over top of it. You don't have roots getting in there, so you're not really going to notice any issues with your system. Hopefully you found this helpful. If you have a plastic tank, like I said, leave a comment below. Let me know, why did you put it in? If you're an installer, how often do you put them in, and how long do they last? I have videos posted every day in the world of well and septic. If you enjoyed this video, you know what to do. Leave a like, hit that subscribe button, and I have more videos posted every day. I look forward to talking to you guys next time.